Hi, my name is Mark Brown with PonyBoy Pop Art. Today I'm going to give a build, paint, and finish process for one of my favorite superheroes, Goku. Goku of Dragon Ball Z fame. He is shown with Kai Rings of Power and is available on CG Trader. And again, I'm going to show the paint and finish process for making this model. This was printed out on a Elegoo Mars printer in gray resin, and the base was printed on a Creality Ender-3 using standard gray PLA. So I hope you enjoy, and we will get right to it. Okay, so at this point we should have all of our pieces of Goku with Kai printed out. Again, these were scaled down to 50% to be able to fit onto the Elegoo Mars. So what we've got are both of the arms, the legs with boots, torso, head, and the 3 Kai rings. We wanted to make sure that we've got any of support things cleared off, any little nubbins. There's a couple of little bits here that I'm going to just kind of pop off with my thumbnail. Just feel around that it's smooth. You notice I do have the gloves on still because I've not cured this yet. One of the things that I've found, especially with the Elegoo, is that the Elegoo resin is allowed to shrink. I believe that the stats are up to 7%, which is pretty significant. So what I like to do is assemble my things before I cure them to be able to ensure that they're going to fit together well, and at least they'll cure together. So what I'm going to do is grab some super glue. Whoa, that was primed apparently, and just pop some on here. And then mount our Goku body. Now I'm going to use a little extra cheat here. Once I'm holding it in place, I have it pretty firm. I'm going to use this quick set, or Insta-Set, that will drop of the Insta-Set once I've got it the way I want. Oh, let's get it on camera here. Drop there, drop there, drop there, and no waiting for the super glue to set. It is set. And so now I'm going to grab an arm. I did have a little bit of an issue here where the it just failed a little bit and did not make his arm fully puffed out, but I'm not worried about that. We're going to be going over a couple of these bits with a little bit of modeling paste, so we'll be able to fix that. But in the meantime, I am going to take some super glue and fill in that hole. Just a dot, really. And look around, see, okay, yep, I had a drain hole here. Just a little dot, and I don't know if I can show there, but it literally kind of sucks into the hole, and it's going to fill it perfectly there. Same here, little dot right into that hole. This one, the arm had a little bit of a flat bit again, so I'm going to scrape some of that off, and then we will hit that up a little bit in the post-processing, and I think that's going to come out fine. Wipe that a little bit extra off. Again, one of the benefits of wearing gloves, you don't get super glue on your fingers. I had another drain hole up here in the hair. Tap that in, and there. Rub it in, and there. Okay, I think we're ready to continue assembling, so let's go ahead and grab the figure here. Cap that hole. And add some super glue around. I can feel my the super glue starting to stick on the gloves. And again, rather that than my fingers. And look at that. Oh, that hair just snapped right into place. That is beautiful. I don't think I'm going to bother with the Insta-Set on that. I apologize for that cut there. My battery died out on the camera. So at this point, we've glued him and cured him. You'll see I've got a little bit of excess white. That's from the super glue and the Insta-Set that I put on there to get that to set immediately. Once it went under the UV, like grubbing alcohol, it leaves a little bit of white residue. But I'm not worried about that because we're going to prime him up. So I'm going to put him in here. Like I do with all my prints, I hit them with a filler primer with PLA. It's absolutely essential if you want to have anything that's not really rough. With the resin, it's just a good idea because it helps the paint stick better, and in cases like this, it's going to cover up those unsightly discolorings. So we're just going to go a couple. It does help if you shake it up well. A couple passes here. Okay, we're going to let that sit. Usually I say 20 minutes, but honestly for something like this with the just the light primer on top of already dry resin, probably about 5, maybe 10. Just check it, and if it's not tacky and not leaving anything on your finger when you touch it, then you're good to go and ready to start painting. Okay, so as you see, we have our Goku complete and primed here. He's looking pretty good. Got a couple of battle marks on him and whatnot. And what we're wanting to do now is get him painted up. So what we're going to do is start finding the most color that we can cover at once, just to start to get a really good feel of what he's going to look like. You'll notice that I've already started to build up what I think is going to be his base color here. I've taken some primary red and some pumpkin and put them into my little palette here, started mixing them up until I got a nice balance that I've got a reference image here. It looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and lighten my brush up a little bit here and just clear it a little bit, and then been taught always start on the back, because if you don't like it, at least then you can hide it a lot easier than when you're right on the front. And yeah, I think this is going to do. So we're just going to go and paint him up as much as we can. Maybe could use a little more red in there. Doesn't take much red, so be very careful when you're mixing red in. I had a whole lot there, and turned out I didn't use much of it at all with all of the pumpkin. I had to put more pumpkin out here. Okay, that's just a little deeper tinge. I like that. This looked a little too much like baby puke. I don't like that. That's had a chance to dry on there and get in. I've realized, yeah, that really still didn't come out quite the right color that I wanted. So added a little more pumpkin patch in here. And that does look like a closer version of this, so We'll try again on the back, and let's see how. See how that does for us. I think that's a lot better. All right, let's go with this. All right, we've got them, get them all painted up, and think he's looking pretty good. I like the coloring of him compared to the original Goku down here. You notice I did get some paint on his arms and that type of thing. Again, not really worried about that. We're going to be going back over that when we do the flesh. The big thing I care about now is that his pants and his top of his tunic are indeed all painted up orange, so that I can go ahead and let that combination go and not have to worry too much about it. Noticed a little bit in the folds here where I missed. I'm still seeing some primer, so I'm going to touch in those. And some of the old darker red. Another thing that I noticed that I'd hoped I would notice earlier, but I didn't, is that his arms did not completely line up here. So I'll be filling those in with some modeling paste. Again, really would have liked to have done that before, but you know, sometimes you don't notice until you've actually start getting into it and the paint goes on and you say, oh, that left something that I didn't want. So what I'm going to do is later on fill a little bit of that in with modeling paste, and same there, and then I'll just repaint that up, touch it up, and no one will ever notice. Until they watch this video, of course. Okay, I've got my setup here, some fresh water, and a couple of brushes because I'm going to be getting into some smaller areas, but do want to cover a fair bit of ground here. And yes, you'll see as I do in most of my videos here. Well, I've only done 2 so far, but in all the future ones as well, I go with the real high-end palettes. I simply get whatever piece of either plastic from my acrylics or piece of thick gloss mailer that came in, and I was supposed to sand that down. We'll have to come back to that in a minute. For my oils, sorry about that, mumbling to myself because I realized, yeah, there was a little bit of a noogie there that I wanted to fix. I'm just kind of painting over it at the moment. I'll have to come back to fix that and then repaint. Again, things that you like to notice beforehand, and especially when you're trying to do something like do a video. But also you can see as I'm going along that sometimes you're going to mess up, and it's okay. You're going to be able to fix it. It's not a problem. Just keep moving along. Do not despair. So one thing I wanted to point out was, as I noted earlier, with acrylics, we're just going to be able to paint over it. So you see that I had some orange spots on his arm, and boom, a little heavy just to make a point. So one of the things that my painting sensei taught me is about painting models and figures and that type of thing, is that a difference between this and painting a picture is that you have no idea what angle they're going to look at it from. So you have to spin it in every possible angle and look at it. And what you're going to find is you'll see areas of primer still, or a bit where your brush dragged and put a different color than you wanted on there. And that's important that you find that out now, rather than when you think you're done and then have an oh shit moment. For those that did print this out on an Elegoo Mars, it is simply amazing. I can see his thumbnail imprint in here, the definitions of the bones in his fingers. It's just stunning. So it's always fun when you get to work on a model that someone's obviously paid attention to the detail, because it lets you pay more attention to more details when you paint it. And the more you can give it, the more lifelike it'll be. Okay, still need to work on that little nubbin there. So as skin's all looking pretty good here, as we're just getting close to painting up the last bits before we age them up, but I did have this little bit of an issue here, so I'm going to go ahead and get that cleaned off of there. Come on. I know you're going to be able to get a hold of it. There we go. And again, yeah, really should have dealt with that before. Didn't really pay attention until the last second. Alright, and a little bit of sanding on there. Looks terrible, but it feels better. So, sorry about that. So I will get that repainted up, and I think now is a good time to touch in those areas here and here with the modeling putty. Alright, so as we noted before, we had a couple of issues that we really should have finished and fixed before we got painting too much, but this is where we're at, so we're going to just fix them now. What I've got is some modeling paste, and just going to take a little bit of that, and I'm also going to have some water ready. And a little bit of this paste on a brush, and let's see, well, you know what, right up in there is a hard line between his hair and his head that I really didn't like, so I'm going to just go up, and I didn't really want to get some all over the paint job like I just did. I think I just got the wrong brush for this one. Yeah, remember what I said earlier, get the right brush? Yeah, let's just try one more try, but at the tip of it. So what I had hoped to show you there, but my phone died, and it's just about to die again, is that the reason I use the paintbrush is that if you dip it in the water and then paint over the areas, you notice that it actually thinned out and filled in. So I had a line back here, and it thinned out and filled in a little bit. Matter of fact, if I tip again here, you can see. So, oh, sorry, get it into the camera there. So we're able to just basically paint this modeling paste where we need it. I'm going to do that again up in here a little bit, and in here a little bit, and I'm going to do that off camera because my phone's about to die. One quick note, if you get it into somewhere, like I had it really thick in here, wet down your brush, paint over it vigorously, you'll see it kind of just thin right out, foam up, and then a little wipe, and boom, that had been filled up. Had I let it dried, all these folds would have disappeared, and as it is, now it's just going to fill in that crack, and the rest will stay, and then I'll just repaint over that. This is where Goku is sitting at this point. We've still got to touch up the color on his tunic here, and there's a couple of other little touch-ups we need to do on some of the skin, but overall he's starting to make a lot of progress from when we first looked at him. So one of the things we're going to do now is move on to the hair. This is the going to be the Super Saiyan Blue version of Goku. If you're familiar with our hero today, you know that he's got a lot of different forms that he can take, and it includes being Saiyan and Super Saiyan Blue or Super Saiyan God. If you're not familiar, do a search Goku SSB and you'll see the version of Goku that we're painting today. So I went looking through my paints. I found a Bluejay, and after looking at the SSB images, thought, yeah, that looked pretty good. So I'm just going to go ahead and start painting the blue onto him. One of the things I wanted to point out is right now would be a real good time to use an airbrush if you had one and you're familiar. I do, but actually there are a lot of people showing videos on how to do airbrush, and I know to some people an airbrush is a little intimidating, or they simply don't have one and can't buy one now because of Corona. So I wanted to show that, you know what, you don't need an airbrush to make some of these and still have them look spectacular. So that's what we're doing, is just using a standard brush. Alright, this is what we're looking at this point, and do remember, look at him from all angles, because you never know how he's going to be looked at in the future. So there's a whole lot of little crevices that I had to get down in there to make sure that all of his hair was blue and not gray from the primer or the original resin even. So while he's drying, we're going to go ahead and start on the base. As we can see, this is rocky terrain, so most likely one of the desolate planets that he often fights on. So I found out that light buttermilk is a nice base kind of rock color for just giving a desolate feel. So helps with some water. So I'm going to just give this a nice starter coat, and we'll go from there. So you can tell I'm not being careful at all, just kind of really slathering this on in a sense. I've already primed it with the filler primer. I didn't bother sanding it or anything because, well, it's meant to be kind of a rocky type of place, so I really don't care if it looks a little rough. I'm going to go back later and add some light brown and dark brown and things of that sort, which will give this an actual real look and feel. But again, kind of like the moon type of look of the light buttermilk. It's like it's been bleached out from the sun. As again, my sensei Joe Brancic over at Likeness 3D, big shout out to him. Check him out, his webpage, likeness3d.com, and he's also on Facebook and pretty gets into the 3D painting groups and whatnot. He was showing me that, they're telling me that really you need to make sure you have a backstory for what your piece is. So think through on why something is the way it is, because it'll help you know how to paint it. It seemed like he was putting me on maybe at first, but he started explaining like he was working on a stormtrooper from Return of the Jedi, and he had it positioned in a swamp standing next to his land speeder. I'm sure you guys remember those, the little ones with that were super fast that they were fighting with the Ewoks with. But so his story was clearly this guy was on duty in the swamp, and so in thinking through that, had specifically added little hints of green on the stormtrooper's boots, because obviously he'd be walking through the muck. And then down at the bottom, you know, having bits of mud and whatnot. So made me realize, no, he wasn't joking me at all. It really does help. And so when I think of this guy, I think of Goku being off on one of the moons where it again is desolate. It's just been bleached out by the sun. It's going to be little bits of dust and grime and dirt that are not so bleached because, you know, of course, it just looks too bland otherwise and not realistic. So we'll come back, but this is a pretty good start. As we look over here on one of our references, I know this isn't a perfect one, but we can see where those colors hit, and that his belt is a little bit lighter color than his undergarments, and then his boots are even darker than all of that. What I've done is grab some ultramarine, some cobalt, and some black. So the ultramarine will be for the deeper, darker parts up here, and the cobalt for the his belt. And as a matter of fact, in looking at it, I think I might have to still mix a little bit of black in there for these parts up here, and then a lot of black for the boots. Now I'm going to stop in a minute here and switch brushes because, like I noted before, it feels like it's the wrong brush. Probably is. Go ahead and take a moment and switch over. So that's what I'm going to do. And just to anyone interested or curious out there, I've only noticed on this video right here that apparently if you start painting and making any sort of documentary or movie or whatever about the painting, you start talking like Bob Ross. It's not intentional. It's just happening. So what we're wanting to do at this point is to give our rocky terrain here a little more feeling of actual rocks and not just this completely bleached out bit here. We're not going to completely cover it because we do want a lot of this multicolor to come through. And as you notice, there is the really bleached white, but then there's still a little bit of somewhat gray that came showing through. I'm going to take some honey brown here and just really lighten that up. And again, just going to play around right now in a moment to see how it's going. That's a little darker than I'd like. So I'm going to water that up a little bit more. There we go. Let's see if you notice here, getting that even more watery and thinned out. It's going to let some of the colors show through, so I kind of like that. So I'm just going to go into some of the areas here, start just playing around. Yeah, kind of like that. It's giving a multi-dimensional look to it. I'll just keep going there. And basically, the nice thing about this is I'm really not looking to be precise. As I've said before, nature's not precise, so you shouldn't be when you're painting nature. If you want it to look realistic, then don't be exact. That's the whole point. You're not trying to recreate a landscape perfectly. You're just wanting your the eyes to not notice anything odd. I took some of the thicker and hit the front face of a couple of these rocks up here, so that just when you're looking at it, it kind of gives more of a feeling like it's an actual rock. And done that with a couple of the deeper crevices here because, you know, again, concept is if it's deeper in, you're going to have less bleaching and more natural earth feel to it. In looking at our model, we may have remembered that Goku had a little divot here on his arm. So what I've done is took a little bit of sculpting epoxy, there you go, 2-part. Just take a little tiny bit, doesn't take much. I've been doing work on another project, so I happen to have a little bit of extra here. Literally just that much of the two combined, and slap that on top of that little, pardon my reach here, that little divot in his arm. I'm gonna just add a little tiny bit more onto there. And it's that little tiny dot. And now I'm gonna smash it in. And then with just a little bit of water, it doesn't take much, just a little moisture on your finger. And start circling it in and smoothing it out. Viola. We have one fixed arm, no divot. I'm just going to grab a little bit of flesh color. Start with this bit where I had to fix the divot in his arm. Now we're seeing some definition, but not a divot, so that's good. Let's look back up here and up under here without now getting flesh color back on his clothes. Whenever you're hitting a hard difference here, like his arm and a sweatband, you want to make sure that you've got a nice straight hard line. Any jaggy, so to speak, or bits that are off like that, those will catch your eye and help break the illusion. Alright, we're going to do the last bits on his boots here, which is this band on the tops, down the front, and then the lacing on there. So I'm going to flip him around, grab our model, and start painting up the boots. Alright, I'm going to start doing the bottom rung there, and we'll come back and do his laces. His eyes are white with blue pupils being matching his hair, and his eyebrows are going to be the same blue. So I've got a very, very, very tiny brush here because this is going to be very precise. We'll grab that Bluejay blue. Get his eyebrows here. Alright, that's looking pretty good. I think we can just dot the pupils here. What I've noticed is it's easier to do half rounds at the top of the eyes than it is to do a full round. So that's what I go with, especially if the model gives me that option. In this case it does. Now those are some eyes, right? Alright, so now I think Goku here is ready to be sprayed with matte. And then my favorite part, weathering him up. So let's go do that. Okay, so we've got our ground that Goku will be standing on. We've got Goku himself, and we've got some matte finish. And so I'm going to be basically spraying him down with a nice covering over everything, because we want to be able to go back with oils, water-based oils, and hit these and give them nice weathering and not mess up any of the paint that we've already got on there. So basically this is what we call locking in our colors. I'm just gonna basically a couple of quick passes, and we're gonna let that dry, then we'll flip them around and do the same on the other side. Looking at him now that he's dried, I gotta say I'm really happy with how he's turning out. The stripes and the detailing coming out on the yellow, that all dried up and colored out nicely. Got the red laces there, and then we see that his belt is matching. Basically that matte coat really helps. As a matter of fact, I did do 2 coats of matte on there. So now it gets to the favorite bit for me, which is weathering. This is where we're going to take and basically going to give him a little less plastic feel and a little more real feel. My favorite for starting to weather is to hit with burnt umber. It basically gives a feeling of either a tan or dirt or grime, really a whole bunch of different aspects. So I'm going to grab a brush here, get just a little bit, and just kind of give us some mud here, so to speak. And this is a water-based oil. One of the differences with acrylics and oils is oils are far more transparent, so this is really going to give a feel of burnt umber to him. And again, we're going to start on the back just so that we can see how does it look. Yeah, a little too thick still. Let's put that out a bit. You know, being left-handed and going across doesn't help. Yep. Let's try this a little bit different. And if you don't like it, just rub it off. But you will see, so I realized, I forgot, usually I want to dry brush this on, but if you compare left arm, right arm, you see where we're going to be going with this real quick. So I'm just going to grab a little bit dry there, and paper towel to dry off some of the water. And let's just try dry brushing this. Oh, there we go. Yep, dry brush technique is much better. And so we'll just get some of this, definitely work it down into the creases and crevices. Don't want too much on, otherwise it'll really, like that, start to build up. But if you do, just brush it around and keep going. It'll even out, and if it doesn't, as you saw, grab a Q-tip and you can wipe it right off. So as a matter of fact, it's a little bit more intense than I want, so I'm just gonna do a little bit of rubbing here. And you can see some of that comes off, but also leaves it down in the crevices to really help give a feel of the definition there. So I'm going to keep going on this. Once I was done giving this a good dry brush rub down, I took just a piece of paper towel here and just kind of buffed it up, and what you see is it's a lot smoother and more natural. So if we just give a quick rub here, it hits the highlights but then smooths it in and leaves it into the deep crevices. So a little more natural tan, not quite so brown, but also gives real good pop and definition. Okay, I've carried that concept through and done that on his face, his back, his neck, and basically anywhere that there was skin showing. And I'm thinking this looks pretty good. At this point, I'm going to take it and go back over and spray it down with matte enamel again because I want to lock all this in. While we've got this out, I figure we'll add just a little more brown into the base here and give a little more depth and realism into our rocky terrain. So this, I'm going to go ahead and let it get a little more wet because I want it to be a little more like mud. And I'm going to really get down into some of the crevices there. Matter of fact, we can get this a lot more muddy. There we go. We're not going to be afraid of mud on this one. I don't want it to be too thick, but I do want it to be somewhat thicker in those ravines. So I'm basically leaving it a little bit in there, but then bringing it around and out into some of the other areas. Okay, Goku is had another coat of matte. It's dried up and starting to really look good. Now what I'm going to do is come back and use some black oil, again water-based, and just going to be doing some dry brushing of that to go and add some more depth to like his clothes and that type of thing. I'm going to start somewhere light that I'm not really worried about and then just see, okay, how's that going to work for me? And what you'll see is it starts to add more dimension into those. Now there's one that I'm going to pay special attention to. There's this rip here, and obviously you really want that to be darker because whatever's inside that rip is going to have shadowed up. So I'm just going to really lay that in a little wet so that it'll seep in. And then go back to dry brushing in these other cracks and crevices. I went a little heavy, but that's okay because I'm going to pick it back up and redistribute it around. And the brush was also still a little wet, so parts you might say, that's not really where you want it. Just take paper towel, do some wipes. And now again it's back to just being in the creases and not so much on the highlights. And that's what we're looking for, just to give more shadows in there on the creases. Now as I've moved into the front, you'll notice this is how I was doing the right leg and the back, but I realized, you know, he's been beaten up and in some fights. He's obviously got some rips and that type of thing, so maybe should be just a little bit more grime and stuff into it. I don't know that I'll leave it quite this much, but again, we can take our paper towel and just wipe some of that off. But right now I want to get it on deep and then I can wipe off the excess and see how it goes. One thing I wanted to share about weathering that's really nice is it can fix some mistakes for you. And here's a prime example. I had a little bleed over of the yellow between the boot and his gi, where the gi tucks into the boot. But also we can pretty much imagine that if he's been scuffling around and that type of thing, all the dirt is going to collect up there. So that's a perfect place for me to really grime this up, and I'm pretty sure that we will not be able to tell that there is a yellow line there anymore. Okay, since I have my black out, now is the time to do one of the painstaking jobs, and that is fine detailing. So I'm taking the absolute smallest brush that I've got, and just a touch of the black. And I'll go right around the eyes. Blotting that off. Doing a slight wipe. So what I'm trying to do here is, and so we'll see how effective I am at it, is getting a rough, generic ring around his eyes so that they're emphasized, but not so black as to having it look like he's wearing mascara. Alright, that's kind of what I was looking for. And usually I would go with just a little bit of crimson and do a wash of crimson over their lips, but this guy doesn't have any lips going on. He's just got a hard, thin line. So what we're going to do is just emphasize that hard, thin line and call that good. Okay, so looking over this guy. I think we're pretty close. I'm going to go ahead and spray him up with Matte Enamel, just to again lock in everything we've done so we don't lose it. Try and get rid of that monobrow that he had there. Okay, all good. Okay, so I'm going to add in a little depth again to this rocky terrain. So since we've got our black out, just going to go back again over into some of these crevices, really get those darkened in, and wait for our matte enamel to dry on Goku over there. Would like to take a minute and give some thanks to some people. I know this is probably about when most people would talk about their sponsors. I don't have any real sponsors unless you think of the type in more of an addiction style. I've got my sponsors as far as my wife, who has been very supportive of me in my addiction into 3D printing and now painting the 3D prints. Also my son, who has been just as accepting as her. Almost as tolerant as her of this. They're also both really happy to see how I'm getting happy, and my business partner, I have to give thanks to him because he is also realizing that a hobby, even if it does become a little bit of an addiction, is still amazing for keeping you sane. Of course, as I noted before, big thanks to Joseph Brancic over at Likeness 3D for getting me into taking these things from just a piece of plastic that got printed on a 3D printer. And also would be remiss if I didn't say thanks to my mom, who was, until recently, I thought the only artist that was really, because I'm learning that I've got a little bit of her blood in me after. Hi, Mom. Let's see how this is looking out here. Alright, so not as bleak of a terrain as it was when we first got it, but I think definitely looks more like actual terrain that someone might be standing on and fighting. And again, maybe we've got a little too heavy, so I'm just going to do a little wipe down on the top. Spray of matte enamel on that. One more time up close. And we'll be done with this piece. And then I've noticed that in the curing and the painting, the pegs on the Kai rings here are too big to fit into the holes there. If you remember me talking earlier, the Elegoo resin shrinks a fair bit when it's curing, so and it's a little bit uneven, so what happened is these holes just got a little bit off. But that's okay. We're gonna sand these down. Sand these little stubs down just a little bit until they fit into the place, and then we'll call it good. Alright, so again, this is going to be mostly dry brushing technique. And I'm going to again start on the back here and basically just kind of test out some, hitting a little bit of the tips of his hair. And you'll notice on some of these, and really my preference is that I really don't have a complete white. It's really just kind of a white tip on the blue. This seems too thick, just blend it out a little bit. Yeah, that's the feeling I was looking for. So I'm gonna just keep on going with that. Okay, I think that's good. And I'm going to take him over and spray him down. At this point, I'm not going to do matte enamel. I'm going to spray his hair with satin, and that gives just a little more sheen to it, which is going to help kind of give a little more feeling of his power and his Kai energy really showing off, I think. And then I'll come back over and we'll finish up on the Kai rings and we'll be ready. Okay, we are so almost there. I had to do a couple of things off camera. So as I noted, I was going to sand down those posts on the Kai rings. It turned out sanding was not quite enough, so I pulled out my Dremel and kept dremeling them down. And let's make sure that, yep, and got each of those worn down a little bit until I could fit it into the holes. And this one took a little bit of extra work because it looked like it had shrank kind of oddly on the hole there. And I had to take a knife and scrape out a little bit of support material in one of the holes, but I was able to verify the Kai rings all slide into place now. I believe I missed the getting video of painting the Kai rings. I actually tried the Cad Yellow and it just really wasn't covering well enough, so I grabbed a can of spray paint of Marigold gloss and hit them with that. In my handling with those scents, I've already had some of the paint peeling, but I really didn't care too much because I knew I was going to be touching this back up with a little yellow or orange and red. And so I'm going to take a breath now and restart with this. So I'm just going to grab a little bit of orange and hit some of the flame tips areas here. As a matter of fact, I do want to thin that out a little bit. There we go. So it's more of just a wash of orange on there. Oh, look at that. As Bob Ross would say, happy little accident. It actually turned out just what I had hoped, maybe a little better. Alright, and at this point, this is the three of them complete. And I'm going to let them dry. And I was thinking of adding a little bit of red wash onto them. That was my original plan with red there, but I gotta say, I think I'm just gonna call it good here. We're going to, again, let these dry. I'm gonna take them over and spray them with gloss enamel. We've already got the gloss there, and I think that'll just help add to that feeling of the power and the flame and all that type of thing, giving the shine onto those. So I'm going to also take a moment to clean my brush. Let's get some actual clean water here to do that. And then we'll be ready for assembly and final presentation. So congratulations if you've been following along and doing the same. I hope to see you guys, and please let me and the original designer see your prints. We'd like to see how they came out. So that's it. We have Goku with Kai complete, and I hope that you've enjoyed the build video today. Please check back for more, and I will continue. Otherwise, check out our webpage and Instagram site, and as well as our Facebook page, all PonyBoy Pop Art. Thanks again.